My name is Harold Finch, and I was 64 years old the morning my mother sat me down at the kitchen table where I had eaten breakfast every Sunday for 50 years and told me I did not belong to the family. The kitchen smelled of chicory coffee and the mustiness that never left that house on Habersham Street, regardless of the season. The oscillating fan on the counter ran even in October. The morning light through the window over the sink came in at a low angle and made the table look like something in a painting. Vera had no idea what was sitting in the brown accordion file I had carried home from my father's study 3 years ago. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge, where quiet choices make the loudest statements. If you've ever built something quietly while others claimed it, this story is for you. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. My name is Harold Finch. I am 64 years old, and I have lived at 118 Habersham Street in Savannah, Georgia for 31 years in a house that I bought in 1993 with the savings from my first decade as a licensed electrician. The house is a narrow 2-story on the east side of the historic district, with a front porch and a magnolia in the yard that drops its leaves in a way that is not quite seasonal, and a cast-iron gate that I rehung in the spring of 2019 because the left post had settled. I know every wire in that house. I put most of them there myself. I worked as a licensed electrician for 34 years in Savannah and the surrounding counties, the last 19 of those as master electrician with my own license and a crew of 4. I retired in October at a party my colleagues held at a restaurant on Congress Street, and I drove home to Habersham Street with a card they had signed and a gift certificate I have not yet used, and I felt, for the first time in a long time, that a particular kind of sustained attention had ended, and I did not yet know what would replace it. That was a Friday. The following morning, Saturday, the day after my retirement party, my adoptive mother called me at 9:03 a.m. and asked me to come to the house. My adoptive parents were Conrad and Vera Finch. Conrad Sr. died 4 years ago at 81, after a long decline that involved 4 hospitalizations and a period of home care that I managed alongside Vera, because Conrad Jr., my adoptive brother, who was 61 and lived in Pooler, about 20 minutes from Savannah, was, as it had always been, present for the occasions and absent for the work. Conrad Sr. had been a veteran and a quiet man, a retired warehouse supervisor who grew tomatoes in the backyard on Habersham and attended the same church on Bull Street for 40 years and never raised his voice at anyone, including at me, which I believe was the most precise expression of love he knew how to make. I had wired the electrical system at the Habersham Street house myself in 1997 when the original knob and tube began failing, and the inspector had cited 3 violations. I pulled the permit, ran the new circuits, replaced the panel, and had the work inspected and passed within 6 weeks. The alternative was a contractor estimate of $22,000, which my parents did not have. I paid for the materials for $1,100 out of my own account. I told them it was a family rate. It was free. I had been paying the property taxes on the Habersham house since 2001. The bill ran between $3,100 and $3,800 per year, depending on the assessment cycle, and I paid it the way I paid other things I had decided to take care of, before anything else, from the top of the month's budget. My parents knew they had stopped thanking me after the 3rd year, which I understood to mean it had settled into the structure of things. In 2009, when Conrad Jr. incorporated his landscaping company, he called me and asked whether I could cover the filing fees. The total was $4,700. I wrote the check the same afternoon. I drove Conrad Sr. to his Veterans Affairs appointments on Eisenhower Drive every other Thursday for 4 years. The appointments were at 10:47 a.m. I picked him up at 10 o'clock and sat in the waiting room and drove him home and stayed for coffee if he wanted company and left when he didn't. He didn't always want company. That was fine. I came back the following Thursday. In the bottom of the brown accordion file I had carried home from Conrad Sr.'s study after his death, behind his discharge papers and his tax records from the 1970s and a photograph of a woman I did not recognize, there was a hardbound ledger, green cloth, wore at the corners, and tucked inside the back cover of that ledger was a manila folder. Inside the folder was a letter, 3 pages, handwritten on lined paper, in a hand I did not recognize, addressed to Conrad Sr. by first name. I had found it at 7:14 a.m. on a Thursday morning 3 years ago, sitting at the kitchen table at 118 Habersham Street with my second cup of coffee. I had read it once. I had put it back in the folder, put the folder in the ledger, put the ledger in the accordion file, and locked the accordion file in the filing cabinet in my study. I had not read it again. I had not needed to. The contents were clear enough on one reading. I had filed Conrad Sr.'s tax returns for 14 consecutive years, after his vision declined too far for him to manage the forms accurately. Every April, I drove to Habersham Street with my laptop and sat at the kitchen table and worked through the documents while Vera made coffee, and I filed by 11:22 a.m. and drove home. The family saved approximately $2,800 per year in preparer fees. I did not calculate a running total until after the disclosure. When I did, it came to $39,200. I had replaced the roof on the Habersham Street house in the summer of 2014. The contractor quotes came in at $21,000 and $24,500. I coordinated a crew through a colleague and brought the project in at $18,400, paid from my own savings, because Vera had mentioned that the ceiling in the back bedroom had begun to show a watermark, and I could see from the ground that 3 sections of flashing had separated. I managed the project across 4 weekends in July and August. I told Vera the cost was half what it was. She did not ask for receipts. After Conrad Sr. died, I spent 3 full weeks at the Habersham house, clearing the deferred maintenance that had accumulated in the final 2 years of his illness. The gutters, the porch boards, the garden gate, a section of the exterior siding on the north face that had begun to separate. Conrad Jr. came one Saturday and stayed for 2 hours. He said the place was looking better. He drove back to Pooler at 4:15 p.m. I arrived at the Habersham house the morning after my retirement party. At 9:03 a.m., Vera had made coffee. She was sitting at the kitchen table with her hands around her cup, and she looked at me when I came in the way a person looks when they have been waiting not for you to arrive, but for a specific moment to become unavoidable. She said, "Harold, sit down." I sat. She said that she and Conrad had talked about this many times over the years. She said that they had always meant to tell me when the time was right, and that the time had never seemed right, and that now, with the estate being sorted, it was better for everyone if I knew. She said, "Harold, you were adopted. You came to us when you were 3 weeks old. Your biological father was Conrad's brother, Walter. Walter died before you were born. We raised you as ours. But legally, the estate was structured around a family line, and the attorney says that means it goes to Conrad and to Junior." I paused. Something in me steadied in a way that surprised me. Not numb, not slow, but very precise, the way a circuit breaker trips to protect the rest of the system. She said, "We love you. That hasn't changed. We just wanted you to know before anything was filed." I said, "I understand." I drove home to Habersham Street. I did not turn the radio on. The morning light on the squares of the historic district made the live oaks look like they had been there since before anyone thought to name the streets, which they had. I parked in front of my house. I sat in the truck. My hands were flat on the wheel. Conrad Jr. called me at 11:22 a.m. that same morning. He said he had spoken with his mother, and he wanted to make sure I was all right and that I understood the situation. I said I understood the situation. He said, "Harold, the estate was structured around the family. You've had a good life. Nobody's taking anything from you. There just was never anything to give in the first place." I breathed through it. I said that was fine. I said I appreciated him calling. We ended the call. I went to filing cabinet in my study at 118 Habersham Street at 7:14 a.m. the following Thursday. I unlocked it with the key I keep on my keyring between the house key and the truck key. I lifted out the accordion file. I set it on the desk. The study smelled of machine oil and old paper and something else I associated with the years I had spent doing careful work in enclosed spaces. I set the accordion file on the desk beside the lamp, and I opened it, and I removed the ledger, and I opened the back cover, and I took out the manila folder. The letter was 3 pages. I read it again, slowly this time, with the lamp on, at 7:14 a.m. on a Thursday in October. The hand was my biological father, Walter's. I had by then confirmed this through 2 documents in Conrad Sr.'s files that contained Walter's signature. The letter was addressed to Conrad Sr., and dated 31 years ago. It said that Walter had known, before he died, that a child was coming. It said that he was leaving the matter in Conrad's hands because he trusted Conrad completely and because there was no one else. It said that the child, if a boy and Walter believed it would be a boy, was to be considered Walter's son and Conrad's nephew in every sense, including the legal sense. It said that Walter had updated his portion of the family trust instrument to reflect this, and that the relevant document was filed with their father's estate in the Chatham County Probate Court, and that Conrad would know where to find it. It said, "Take care of him the way I would have if I had been given the time." The letter was signed Walter Finch. I held the letter for a while. My hands were steady. I called Gloria Means at her office on Bay Street at 8:52 a.m. Gloria was an estate attorney I had known peripherally for several years through a colleague. Her assistant put me through at 10:47 a.m. I told her I had a document I believed was relevant to a current estate proceeding. She said to come in. I drove to her office at 11:22 a.m. with the accordion file on the passenger seat. Gloria Means was 62, precise and unhurried in the way of a person who has spent decades working in situations where haste causes damage. She read the letter twice. She read it a third time more slowly. Then she looked at me and said, "Harold, do you know if this trust instrument was actually filed?" I said I did not know. She said she would find out. She picked up her phone and called Reginald Foss at the Chatham County Probate Court and asked him to search the estate record for a trust amendment under the name Harold Walter Finch Sr. She was on hold for 4 minutes. Reginald Foss came back on and said there was a filing. Gloria Means set down her phone. She looked at me again. She said, "It's there." I didn't speak. She said, "The filing predates the current estate proceeding by 31 years. If it's authenticated, it supersedes the intestate distribution Conrad Jr. has been operating under." She said she would need a handwriting verification. I told her I had 2 samples of Walter Finch's signature in the accordion file. She called Arthur LeMay, a certified forensic document examiner on Oglethorpe Avenue, and scheduled an examination for the following week. Arthur LeMay examined the letter and the signature samples at his office on Oglethorpe Avenue at 9:41 a.m. on March 14th. He spent 40 minutes. He produced a written authentication report confirming that the handwriting and signature were consistent with the known Walter Finch samples at confidence level of 97.3%. He gave me the report in a brown folder. I thanked him. I drove back to Bay Street. Gloria Means filed a probate challenge at the Chatham County Probate Court at 2:38 p.m. on November 3rd. Reginald Foss received the filing and stamped the record. The estate proceeding was suspended pending the supplemental hearing. The hearing was set for March 14th. Conrad Jr. received a notification from Gloria Means's office the following Tuesday at 9:03 a.m. He called me 3 times that day. I did not answer the first 2. On the 3rd call, I picked up and I said, "Conrad, I have an attorney. Please call her." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Harold, why are you doing this?" I kept my expression steady. I said, "I'm not doing anything. I'm following what our father wrote." Conrad Jr. did not speak to me for 6 weeks. His real estate agent, a woman named Patricia Odom from a Century 21, franchise on Victory Drive, had walked through the Habersham house in October, 2 weeks after the disclosure, taking measurements with a laser tool and making notes on a tablet. Vera had told me afterward, in the particular tone she used for things she was uncomfortable saying directly, that Junior had been looking into options for the property. My shoulders went tight when she said that. I looked at my hands. The supplemental hearing was on a Thursday morning in April at the Chatham County Probate Court on Montgomery Street. Gloria Means presented the letter, the authentication report from Arthur LeMay, and the original trust amendment filing, which Reginald Foss had pulled from the archive, a 2-page typewritten document with Walter Finch's notarized signature at the bottom, filed in April of 31 years ago, for months before Harold Finch Jr. was born. The document stated clearly that any biological child of Walter Finch was to be considered a full heir under the family trust, with equal standing to the surviving children of Conrad Sr. The probate judge was a woman named Harriet Odom Coles. She read the trust amendment and the authentication report and asked Gloria Means 2 questions, and then looked at Conrad Jr.'s attorney and said that the filing appeared to be valid, and that the estate distribution would need to be recalculated. Conrad Jr. was sitting across the table. His face had gone the color of the old plaster walls in the Habersham house. That particular gray-white that happens when something's been covered over many times and the last coat is finally thinning. He was looking at the trust amendment. His attorney was writing on a legal pad. I placed a manila folder flat on the table in front of me. I closed it. I did not say anything. The room held. I picked up the accordion file. I thanked Gloria Means. I walked out of the Chatham County Probate Court at 11:22 a.m. on a Thursday in April and stood on Montgomery Street and looked at the live oaks in the median and the morning light coming through them at the angle. It comes through in Savannah in April, which is different from every other month's angle, and I breathed the air, which smelled of cut grass and particular mineral smell of old stone that Savannah carries in the spring. The estate was formally recalculated on April 19th. Gloria Means called me at 3:17 p.m. to confirm the outcome. The Habersham house remained with Vera for her lifetime under the trust terms, which was what I had wanted. The liquid assets, the pension remainder, the savings accounts, the brokerage, were divided equally between Conrad Jr. and Harold Finch. My share came to $94,300. I did not call Conrad Jr. I drove home to 118 Habersham Street. I walked to the front door and I went to the study and I put the accordion file back in the filing cabinet and I locked it and I stood in the study for a moment and then I went to the kitchen and I made coffee and I sat at my own kitchen table and I thought about Walter Finch, who died before I was born and who wrote 3 pages on lined paper 31 years ago and asked his brother to take care of me the way he would have if he had been given the time. He was given enough time to write the letter. That turned out to be sufficient. Harold Finch, 64 years old, and the son of 2 men who did what they could. The man who raised you and the man whose blood you carry are not always the same man. Sometimes they are both. A retirement party on a Friday, a kitchen table on a Saturday, and a letter written 30 years before either of them. Before you go, here's what I want to ask. If you had been sitting at that kitchen table on a Saturday morning and heard what Harold heard, what would you have done with the accordion file? Would you have opened it, or would you have left it locked? Leave that in the comments. And if you have ever carried something quietly that turned out to matter more than anyone knew, this story was for you. If you like this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of this sphere.